There are moments in every person's life when they face intense adversity. They're crucibles that forge who they become as individuals and as leaders. Now more than ever, we need leaders who are called to a higher standard, focused on leaving it better than they found it, and paying it forward to the next generations. Now, let's join Fire Chief Randy Brookman as he speaks with leaders from all walks of life, as he explores and learns from their personal journeys and the crucibles that have forged them into better leaders and better people.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Crucible podcast. It's a pleasure to have on the show today Sheriff Michael Chitwood of the Volusia County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Chitwood was born in 1963 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's a second-generation law enforcement officer. He began his career with the Philadelphia Police Department in November of 1988, where he worked in the Patrol, Tactical, Narcotics, and Detective Divisions and rose to the rank of lieutenant and was a recipient of 58 official commendations for valor, bravery, heroism, and merit. From Philadelphia, he went on to be the police chief in Shawnee, Oklahoma, the police chief in Daytona Beach Police Department in Florida, and was elected the Volusia County Sheriff in August of 2016. He was re-elected without opposition in August of 2020, and he has just announced that he is running for his third term. He's a graduate of the Philadelphia Police Academy, the FBI National Academy in Quantico, and the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. He holds a bachelor's degree in organizational management from Eastern University of Pennsylvania and a master's degree in criminal justice from Nova Southeastern University. Welcome, Sheriff Chitwood, to the Leadership Crucible podcast. It's just an honor to have you on the show today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Well, thank you. You know, you're a second-generation law enforcement officer. You started your career in Philadelphia, where you worked your way up through patrol and tactical and narcotics and the detective division, and rose to the rank of lieutenant, received 58 commendations for valor and bravery and heroism and merit. And you know, I just would like you to tell us about that experience, because that had to be, you know, growing up in Philadelphia or around Philadelphia and then coming onto a major department like that had to just be really quite the experience.
Yeah, it was, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. You know, growing up, all I ever knew of my dad, and actually all I do know of him, I'm going to be 60 years old here shortly, all I know is my dad as a cop. You know, I was born in November of 63. In January of 64, he went into Philadelphia Police Academy, and he retired 5 years ago at the age of 75.
Wow.
So that's all I knew. And growing up as a young boy, my father was my hero. As a teenager, he was the Antichrist. And I wanted nothing to do with police work. I wanted nothing to do with anything that he stood for. And then after I dropped out of college the first time, I said, you know, I got married at a young age. I had a couple kids right away. And all of a sudden, the family business didn't look like such a bad way to have a living. Yeah. So, you know, at the age of 23, I took the fire department test. Actually, at the age of 22, I took the fire department test and the police department test. Philadelphia back then had about 2,200 firefighters and 7,000 cops. But much to my chagrin, or maybe it was a good thing that happened to me, the overwhelming majority of firefighters were veterans. So even if you got 100 on the test, veterans got 10 extra points, you were nowhere near going to get hired, even with a perfect score. But on the other hand, the police department test, you could get 100, and they chew through applicants. You know, I think the average back then was for every 5,000 people that passed the test, they might have gotten 100, maybe 100 out of that 5,000. So I did it. I got hired in November of 87, I think it was, and graduated from the academy, was assigned to the transit division. Was there for about 6 months and I got my first promotion. They promoted me up 27 steps to walking a foot beat on the street. And then the next 18 years was just unbelievable. It was, I loved every minute of it, whether it was patrol, tactical unit, narcotics, the detective division. I was a commanding officer of this, what's called our boardwalk, South Street, which was interesting. There's like 250 bar and restaurants in a 1.1 mile straight stretch. and then got to go down to the homicide division, which was the highlight of my Philadelphia career, to put your wits against murder suspects.
So how long were you in homicide?
I was in there maybe almost 3 years, and I had been on as a lieutenant for a couple of their years there. I think it was about 3 years there. I ran our gun violence task force out of West Philadelphia. So, we were doing nothing but violent crime, and then the next move was obviously when an opportunity came, just lateral into the homicide division, and it was someplace I wanted to go because I grew up in there as a kid. What I mean is my dad was a homicide detective, so I went down there and played in the homicide division. When I was in high school, the clerk typist helped me type all my research papers because who had a computer back then?
Yeah.
They did. But I can also tell you that it also made me look into becoming a police chief, because the first 5 cases that me and my squad caught were all baby deaths, all baby homicides, drownings, dismemberment, choked to death, you name it. They were the first 5 jobs. I had never had a baby death in my entire time as a police officer, and here you are now. And it was the first 5, and it really made me think what my career path was going to be, because I would come home at night and drink a 6-pack and cry myself to sleep. Yeah. And then get up the next morning, go out for a run, and go right back to work again, because oh my God, how could you do this to a baby? And it really made me think, is this where the rest of my career is going to lie? You're going to catch these jobs, and it'll drive you nuts if you continue to do this.
So you talked about wanting or tracking to be a police chief. You went on to Oklahoma to be a chief there, I think, for a year, and then went on to Daytona Beach, where you were the police chief.
Yes, correct.
And now you are the chief, or not the chief, but the sheriff in Volusia County, Florida. So kind of tell us about that journey, if you would.
Yeah, when I was handpicked. There were a group of lieutenants. Philadelphia was suffering a spate of unusually high gun violence, and the interim police commissioner was a gentleman by the name of Sylvester Johnson, and he wanted to be the police commissioner, and he eventually became the police commissioner. But there was this spate of just crazy things that were going on in the city, quadruple shootings, and it just like violence. This violence just erupted even above the norm. So on a Saturday morning, he put together a meeting of all kind of people, all the big brass, and he brought in a bunch of lieutenants to this meeting. They were guys and girls like me that were either in narcotics or intelligence, or were running the special investigative unit in different geographical areas. And, I'm out running one morning. In fact, they had pagers. The pager goes off. It's police headquarters on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. I'm like, what could be going on here? This is like 2002, maybe. I think it was 2001. So I run up to a payphone, I pop the quarter in, and it goes right up to the commissioner's office. And, hey, you need to be in the auditorium at 12 o'clock. And I get in there, and there is more brass flying around that place than you could ever imagine. And the police commissioner announces that geographically he is putting a lieutenant in charge of gun violence, this gun violence task force, and there'll be a lieutenant in charge of intel in that geographical area. There'll be a lieutenant in charge of narcotics. And then he laid out the command structure, and we're going to do this for 90 days to abate this problem. Well, imagine being in a room like that, and you have deputy commissioners, you have chiefs, you have inspectors, and you have captains, and the commissioner just anointed these 12 lieutenants that are going to be the tip of the spear in this fight against gun violence. And to tell you, the room was quite a buzz. But at the end of that 90 days, I had budgetary authority. I had command and control. I had tactics. I was doing all these things, and all these bosses were assisting me. At the end of 90 days, I'm thinking, I could do this on my own. Yeah. And later that year, or probably about a year and a half later, I applied to be the police chief in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and I got hired.
And the rest is history, right?
And the rest is history. The greatest thing that ever happened to me, it's funny because yesterday I announced I was running for re-election for my third term. And the reporter asked a question about, how would you describe your career and your longevity? You're in your 36th year now. 10 and a half of those years you were the chief in Daytona. You were able to roll that into being the sheriff. You're running for your third term. And I said, one of the things is you have to give people an opportunity. And I pointed to my former city manager who was there, who was a city manager in another city here. And I said, that man there in the gray suit, and the first African-American mayor in the history of the city of Daytona Beach, took a gamble on a 42-year-old Philadelphia kid and brought him to Daytona Beach and allowed him to implement all these harebrained ideas. CompStat, district policing, bike patrol, trying to get my cops to go back to school through a foundation, technology like tag readers and touch DNA, all of these things that never happened. And they took a risk, they took a gamble on me and allowed me to be me. And so here we were 10 and a half years later, and now I'm the front runner to the county sheriff's position, which is the largest agency in the county. And, we're a full service organization. We do it all. So that was kind of an interesting way your career takes a term you would never thought of. And here you are.
Yeah. What's some of your most difficult challenges that you're facing today?
I would tell you we're all facing the same thing. It's recruitment and retention. A lot of men and women coming through the door here are not looking at this like you looked at your career and I looked at my career. This is what I was going to do. This is my passion. This is my vocation. I'm not going to branch out. When people leave us, they don't leave us to go to another policing agency. They leave us because they're leaving the profession. Their degree may have been in accounting. Well, that's where they're headed. They may be going into the nursing field. They may be going into opening up a lawn care. So that's what we see when they leave. That's a challenge. How do I spend so much money on you? As you are well aware, the biggest outlay of my budget is human capital. Probably 85% of my budget goes toward that: the training, the equipment, the technology, medical benefits that go with your salary, and then you turn around after 3 or 4 years, and that's that window. It's 0 to 5 years where my biggest turnover rate is, and now you're going to have to do it all over again. The other big challenge is always the community, making sure you're tied into the community, because in my position, you're not going to get elected if you're not listening to your community and serving them properly. And then the third one on the rung is fentanyl. Fentanyl is behind everything. We're in my county. We're probably the 8th or 9th largest county in the state. Our population is pushing 570,000. We average 300 overdose deaths a year the last 5 years, and probably 10 and a half times that number in overdoses. We just did a huge narcotics sting. We were up on a wire with the feds and some other organizations, and we believe an organization in the west side of our county was bringing in 6 to 8 kilos of fentanyl a month. To put that into perspective, 1 kilo of fentanyl produces 1.5 million doses. Let me rephrase that stat. We seized 2,200 grams of fentanyl in this operation. 2,200 grams of fentanyl equated to 1.5 million doses that hit the street once they cut it and repackage it. That's just one county, one of the largest states in the country. Imagine if that is every county is seeing what we're seeing, how much fentanyl is out there. And it's in everything. Kids think they're buying marijuana, it's laced with fentanyl. College kids think they're going to get a party drug like Adderall, it's in there. It's pure fentanyl pressed to look like a party drug. Ecstasy, MDA, all laced with fentanyl.
Yeah. It's just incredible what's happened in the last several years, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, there's some people out there that will say, well, they got what they deserve. Well, that was the attitude until fentanyl hit. And then we changed the paradigm. Now, every overdose death, homicide detectives and narcotics detectives respond to the scene, and we try to see if we could backtrack to go after the seller, because the laws have gotten tougher to go after the seller. But people have a view of, they don't view you, if you have a substance abuse issue, they don't view you as if you have high blood pressure or diabetes or heart disease. But substance abuse is the same thing. So there's a stigma attached to an overdose death. And these folks that are dying aren't criminals. Yeah. There are kids, there are brothers, there are husbands, wives, grandparents, neighbors, coworkers. When you do the victimology, these are people that somehow had a substance abuse issue and fell down this path, and then they end up dead.
Yeah, and many times it's just a single occurrence. They went out to party and they're 19 years old and take the wrong thing.
And that's what we're seeing. That's what you're starting to see more and more of.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because I know law enforcement's been really under the microscope here in the last few years. How's that changed your profession, and how's it changed how you approach your job?
It's changed our profession in the fact that you look around, you cannot recruit and you cannot hire. Minority applications are way down. Although I will tell you, we receive a lot of Hispanic. We're seeing a growing number of Hispanics in our area anyway, moving toward law enforcement. But we're seeing a decline in black candidates. These are male and female. They're just not gravitating toward law enforcement. So that's something that I think is going to be a long-term generational thing to turn that tide back. The other challenges are the mistrust. Look at what's going on with the FBI today. Whether you believe what's going on, not going on, or some of the truth lies in the middle, you have this absolutely coming after as the bad guy, the law enforcement community that's there. And, the cops never right no matter what they do. And, of course, technology, the cameras that are out there, not only are we recording, but the community's recording you. And you always have to be on guard for when they post that 3-second clip that now turns the community wild, when in reality, if you look at our body camera and you saw the whole 3-minute clip, you'd say, well, now I understand why the cop did that, but it's too late. Now you're in damage control the entire time. I release body camera footage, right, wrong, or different, anywhere between 4 and 24 hours after an incident occurs. And if I need to get allies together, it'll be later. If I know it's cut forward, I release it within that 4-hour window.
Yeah, no, I think that transparency, helps to diffuse those situations almost immediately, and I think more people should kind of follow your lead on that.
There are no secrets in today's society. I mean, there's none. I hold a staff meeting, and I walk out of the conference room, and I walk down the hallway, and the phone's ringing in my office about something we discussed in the staff meeting.
Oh, yeah.
How it's going to affect a union member or whoever. And you're like, my God, can you at least let me get to my desk before you start calling me about it?
Yeah. There's no secrets anymore. That's for sure. So what our podcast is called the Crucible for a reason, and one of the things that I always like to ask our guests is, what's been a crucible moment for you in your life? What's really helped to shape who you've become as a leader and maybe as a person?
I think it's not just one incident. I think I don't believe that leaders are born. You might be born with some characteristics, but leaders are really made. And when I look through everything I've ever done, my dad was in law enforcement. My dad gravitated into being a police chief. So I watched that transformation. Sports, you think to yourself, the coaches that you had that preached about hard work, playing the game the right way, sportsmanship, all those things go into it. And then you go into your profession, and you as you're going through different ranks and different assignments, you meet these people that kind of like, I like the way this person handled that. I like the way they do their, and then of course, conversely, you have people like, man, don't ever want to be near that. And then what happened was I never had an intention to do anything in Philadelphia other than to make detective and become a homicide detective like my father. I had saw that lifestyle. He was in narcotics. He became a detective. He investigated every crime except murder, and then eventually he transferred into the homicide division and investigated only murders. And I guess it was 1997, maybe. I got promoted to sergeant. I had a brain fart and I took the sergeant's test. I don't know why. I took the sergeant's test. I was a detective. I was happy. I made sergeant. I'm sergeant maybe 2 months. And we get a brand new police commissioner who's a guy named John Timoney. And he's Irish, brogue, right out of New York, Central Casting. I'm coming on 4 to 12, so I'm getting ready to come up to do my briefing at 3:30. I'm in the locker room, and there's a gun battle in the police parking lot of police headquarters. There's a gun battle between us and a bad guy. I throw my nightstick down the front of my pants, my gun, my handset. I run upstairs, and now we're chasing this guy down the street. He runs into an alleyway, which we all know is a dead-end alleyway. And now it's don't pile on the rabbit. There's 20 cops in an alleyway that's maybe 4 foot wide, maybe, trash strewn, and everybody's on top of this guy. And all I hear is, make way, make way. I spin around, and there is this new police commissioner in West Philadelphia at 3:30 in the afternoon, where we're all on top of this guy. Who's in charge here? And you look around, like, well, I have a T-shirt on. I could probably say nothing. I don't know if I'll get away with it, but I'm like, I'm in charge. What's your name? Sergeant Chitwood. Get that man in the back of the wagon and get him to the hospital, and you get into my office tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Oh, God, this is going to be, in best case, the shortest stint of a sergeant ever. At worst case, I'm going to get fired. That afternoon, I go get my hair cut, get everything ready to go. 10:30 in the morning, I'm outside of his office door waiting for him. He comes breezing in, takes me into his office, sits down, he puts his feet up on the desk, got my personnel file there, talks about all my commendations, talks about my lack of having a college degree, and he proceeds to tell me the first leadership lesson. You're a first-line supervisor. You are no longer part of the mob. You're the one that has to control the mob, because what I saw there was a sergeant not taking charge. I don't ever want to see that again. You never let that happen. When you get out of that car, you show up on scene as the sergeant, everybody looks at you for direction from here on out. You got it? I got it. Why didn't you get a college degree? Well, I went to school, I dropped out, got married, had kids. He said, we're going to remedy that. He said, and you need to think big picture. Where do you want to be? And I don't want to use that cliche 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Where do you want to be? What do you want from your career? What do you want to leave? What legacy do you want to leave behind? I was like, well, I never thought of anything like that. And I went back to school. I started taking advanced classes, and every time something would come up that we can go to as a department, I would sign up to take those classes, no matter what it was, to learn more about that. And then eventually, I became a lieutenant, and eventually all of that geared me toward I want to lead my own police department. So meeting this guy that came in with this dynamic personality, his ability to turn an organization on its head, modern thinking, always thinking of the future. He was always looking at the future. The sergeant's going to be the lieutenant. The lieutenant's going to be the captain. I want to move these men and women along because it's better for our profession. Not remember me, but that's not what our job is. Our job as leaders is to lead and set that table. You're going to make difficult decisions. Don't expect to be around forever, but you want to leave it better than you found it.
Yeah. Well, it's a great example of him paying it forward too, because he kind of reached back and helped you get on the right track. So.
And I will tell you, when you go back now, because there's a lot of us that came from his leadership and tutelage that are police chiefs around the country now, or are currently high-ranking police officials in the Philadelphia Police Department, and you could ask every one of them, there was a defining moment where he saw something, heard something, or read something, where you got yanked into his office, and you got the riot act read to you, and were told, here's the path you need to go. And this is what the way you should be thinking. The way you're thinking now isn't right. This is the way you need to go. And I think there's a lot of us that owe him that,
Yeah, that's one of the things I think that's lacking today is that kind of feedback. I think people are somewhat concerned to have that frank discussion with their employees in some cases today. So from a leadership perspective, how do you view the current state of leadership in our country and society today?
There's a dearth of it. If you look at, there was a Washington Post article out on Sunday. Philadelphia, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and I'm probably missing Charleston, South Carolina. There's about 8 or 9 police departments, major police departments in the country that have a vacuum for leadership. And there's a myriad of reasons for that. There's a lot of people that don't want to apply for the top job because they know once they get hired, the clock's running on when they're going to get fired.
Yeah.
But if you lay low at the other ranks, if you lay low at a deputy chief or a division chief or a captain, you're going to have a lot more longevity in your career. And that's sad because what I see is that when it comes time for an elected official to throw somebody under the bus, they're throwing the police chief or the police commissioner under the bus, even though it's what they want, the elected official wants implemented, even though it's what they ran on, the platform they ran on, and your job's to implement that. And then they turn around and say, yeah, the commissioner's not doing the right thing, see you later. And then I think you see where the Washington, D.C. chief, his big thing was that protesters actually showed up at his house. And his family couldn't get out. And he's got young kids. And he said, you know what? I don't need this in today's world. I mean, I've had it happen.
Yeah, and I was just going to bring that up. That's not an anomaly. That's happening to police officers and sheriffs, deputies, and leaders in those departments all over the country. And
you have to say to yourself, is it worth it? I mean, we just had a anti-Semitic incident here with a neo-Nazi group. I won't go on over that I called out, and I did it extremely loud. I held a news conference where I identified who they were, what their criminal histories were, and showed video clips that they posted themselves, attacking Jewish folks, attacking black folks, attacking folks for ethnicity or their sexual orientation. Shortly after that press conference, the death threats from all over the world came rolling in. They tracked down my parents. They tracked down my middle daughter. She's the only one that's not married at her place of employment, and it just went on for over a month. So I can understand why you could turn around and say, I've had it. And I think the reason I announced earlier, the election's not till November 24, but the reason I went out yesterday was it got louder and louder and louder. Chitwood doesn't need this BS. He can leave. He doesn't need this BS. He can leave. And I was like, no, we have to show them I can deal with this. I really don't care. I'm not backing down. Let's make the announcement and let's go forward. And I think it resonated very, very well.
Yeah.
But I'm an anomaly on that. I don't have little kids at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a really difficult situation, and I wish, the layman out there would understand just, how much pressure that puts on you and impacts not only you as a professional, but your family.
I would never want any of my deputies to go through what my family went through. Me, I signed up for this. It's aggravating, but I signed up for it. My parents are older. They don't need that. My daughter is a young lady. She don't need to be the vile, despicable calls that were coming in to her. And she had to change everything on Facebook, and she got to get off of Facebook. She had to get off of a new cell phone because it was relentless. Yeah. And if I gave an order out that when this group comes to protest or you're going to encounter them, no name tags. No name tags, because in other parts of the state, what they did to me, they did to officers that were on a protest line.
Yep.
And and I could see some of those officers when I met with them in their eyes. They work at different departments. I could see it was running through their mind. How much longer do I want to do this?
Well, I was front and center on an issue of civil unrest when we were in Anaheim, and I got to watch our police officers take that kind of abuse, and it's I tell you, I wish everybody could see the professionalism that your folks bring to the table every day, because it's inspiring.
You asked the question earlier, and I told you about fentanyl and recruiting and training. The internet is just we're so far behind in policing and technology and what the things that they can do. And now with this AI, that's going to be the future is going to be really looking grim for us. We know we have at least one fraud case where they were able to call an elderly woman and using AI make it sound like her son, who was involved in a hit and run, drunk, and they needed $10,000 to bail him out. And she went and she said, no, it was my son. It wasn't her son. They were using AI to mask that and make it sound like her son.
Yeah. Yeah. A new challenge, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's why we sign up for it, right? Because there's always going to be challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you, for the next generation of leaders, what challenges do you think that they're going to face?
I think the challenge with technology is going to be really, really big for them. And I think the folks that I'm hiring now in their 20s and I'm watching this on their psychologicals. There seems to be a running theme about interpersonal skills. They don't score that high on the psychological, and that interpersonal skills, as you know, that you need that to survive in this business.
Yeah.
But their nose is buried in this thing.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they communicate, through texts and emojis. You can't survive that way, and you can't survive that way, in my opinion, as a leader. Because as a leader, you know, you have to have empathy. You know, you have to make that one-on-one connection, no matter what it is. You know, I'm going to be 60. When I was in my 40s, my memory was much better. You know, I could walk in the police headquarters in Daytona Beach and tell you and name your kids. Now I just know you have 2 boys and a girl. I don't remember all that. But I think you have to have, if you're going to lead, you have to have that interpersonal contact with your employees and your community. And you have to fight for, protect, and serve your community. And you can't do that online. And you have to fight, advocate, and serve your employees. And if you do that, your organization will constantly be on the rebirth and in those beginning stages. Because if you don't have that, the organization is going to run the cycle of life: a birth, an early, midlife, decline, and it's going to die. So you gotta, if you're going to lead, you can't lead by email. You just can't do it. You got to walk around. You got to feel it. You got to taste it. You got to smell it. Maybe I'm getting old and I'm old fashioned, but I tell my command staff all the time. They'll say, "Well, I sent an email out about it." Don't send an email. Send an email. Great. You need documentation, but then go to briefing and explain the order. Go out on a ride along and explain. If you explain the order to a couple informal leaders in the squad or the platoon or whatever, that message is going to catch wildfire that, hey, I rode with the chief or the sheriff or the division chief or even the lieutenant. He said, hey, this is why the order is or the policy is or the procedure is this way, as opposed to just hit send and think everything is solved with the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that connectivity is really, really important. I think you're right. I think the next generation has been really buried. That's emerging into the market now. It's been really buried in the whole social media, cell phones. So I think there's going to be a real training opportunity there for them if they're going to be successful long term.
Work from home.
Yeah.
You know, there's an experiment going on with communications that you could have certain people log on and do certain things as opposed to physically being in the building. I haven't bought into it, but there's some places that are experimenting with non-emergency calls going to somebody who's sitting in their kitchen monitoring their iPad, and they're going to dispatch or put calls in from their home on non-emergency calls. And as you know, it could come in and sound like it's not an emergency, but we all know that it's a priority one, and we got to get there. Just because it came in as a barking dog, it's something completely different, you know. So that's I don't know if that's really a good idea to head down that path, but we see it because we did it. You know, we did it with COVID. My HR folks could work from home, finance could work from home, you know, and then you get Me Too, and well, next thing you know, the only person you got out there is the dispatchers and the people pushing the cars around.
Yeah, no, and it's a real challenge. I think this, you know, I know a lot of organizations are experimenting with this hybrid model. We'll see where all that goes in the future, but we'll just have to watch that.
We're trying to do it with work-life balance. You know, we just by the law, we just took over the patrolling the beaches. We're not lifeguards, but patrolling the beaches, and that could be kind of boring. You know, we have 32 miles of beach. Yeah. So what we tried to do to sweeten the pot was, hey, here's what we'll do for you. If you come to the unit, it's 4 10s. Yep. Day work is 8 to 6. Mid shift will put you on 12 to 10. And then the night shift, because I do have people back to school or whatever, night shift, you come in 1 o'clock in the morning and you're done at, 10 a.m. or whatever it is, 11 a.m. And surprisingly, we got 140, 500 sworn. We got 140 resumes for that. It's like, oh man, this is the greatest shift in the world. 4 10s. And, this is great. You 3 days off.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's nice to have that kind of break too. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what as we leave today, what advice would you give to the next generation in respect to really making a difference in their own life journey?
I would say this to you. Guys like me, we have more time in our rearview mirror of life than out the front window of life. We all have our day in the sun. For the younger leaders, your day is coming. You have a moral and ethical obligation to step up, no matter whatever it is, police, fire, EMS, if it's, managing a financial firm. You have the duty and the obligation to step up, to make sure you're educated, and be educated in the past, be educated in the present, and be educated in the future, because you are the future. I did the best that I can do. There'll be a point in time I say that, and I would hope to God that the man or woman who comes behind me takes it and moves it forward. And that's what for your leaders to do. You may not see it now. You might not think I'll never be that guy or that girl that's in charge, but you will be. You may be it by accident, or you may do it by design, but there's going to be a point in time where you're going to need to step up and lead. And I think that's what we have to preach. We need the younger generation. I always say this when I go to Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or Cub Scouts or talk to kids in school. You are the future of this country. It's in our DNA to lead. It's not in our DNA to follow. So you need to step forward and do that. Bring your perspectives, bring your education, your family history, bring all of that to the forefront, and you'll make our professions, no matter what it is, a better place.
Yeah. Great advice. Sheriff Chitwood, thank you so much for being on the Leadership Crucible podcast. I think your insights are inspirational, and I truly appreciate what the men and women do in law enforcement each and every day, and we thank them for their service.
I appreciate you letting me ramble.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you guys, too.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Crucible podcast. If you have a story of adversity you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. Join us next time as we continue to explore how to live lives of success and significance.